Great, thanks so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Sounds
Oh,
great.
great. Wonderful. It's really so great to be here, and just super energizing to see folks from so many different disciplines, countries, taking part in this, and we're just going to be able to learn so much from each other over the 4 days of the training. So I'm just super excited to be here, and thanks to the whole BITSS team and SIGA team for putting this together. So as Katie said, I'm going to start out by discussing issues around the scientific ethos and some kind of larger frame questions around what open science is, what research transparency is, and sort of why it matters. So again, just a little bit of background about myself. I'm a development economist, and I work at University of California, Berkeley. I work with different types of data. So this is relevant when we talk about different types of research. I work with experimental data, also observational data. My main research focus is on African economic and political development. And but I've worked on a few other topics as well. So that's my background. I know we're all coming from different backgrounds, so it's going to be cool when we do speak to get a chance to introduce ourselves and sort of share the perspective that we're coming from. All right, so just in terms of where we're starting here, this is the Rt2 Road Map that Katie and Alex had shared before. And what I'm going to be talking about today really touches on several issues here around scientific practice and misconduct, and really kind of just big picture about how a bunch of these pieces fit together. My second session, the one in an hour, will very much focus in on pre-registration, pre-analysis plans, and kind of that piece of Rt2. But the opening talk is a little broader, covering a number of different areas. Okay, so I want to just start with a bit of background and give you guys a sense of some of the intellectual history around scientific practice, scientific norms, and really where the culture of scientific research comes from. There are a number of treatments of this issue, but one of the most influential ones and most cited ones was developed by Robert Merton, as Katie had mentioned. In writing in the 1940s, Robert Merton is a influential sociologist, and he really sort of articulated what the scientific ethos is and sort of what it means to follow that set of practices. What's, I think, really nice about reading Merton is he tries to place scientific practice and research practices within social structures and institutions and try to understand. It's really a way of understanding why this set of practices are a kind of equilibrium that reinforce each other to create a particular culture of scientific practice. So in that sense, it's really neat to read. The discussion of the scientific ethos goes beyond simply saying, well, scientists should do X, Y, and Z, but he talks about them as these self-reinforcing norms that are binding, in the quote I have here, not just because they're efficient, not just because they're kind of delivering better science, but because they're believed to be right and good. So they're sort of moral prescriptions as well as technical prescriptions. So there's a feeling that these are practices that will lead to more scientific progress, but also have value in and of themselves. So let me go through what some of these are, and we can talk about how they connect to current research transparency and open science practices. So there's 4 core values that Merton lays out and that have been widely discussed since then. The first is universalism. The second, communality. The third is disinterestedness. And the fourth is organized skepticism. So I'll kind of go through each of these in turn and talk about them and sort of how Merton understands them, and then we can discuss them. So feel free to jump in with comments or put stuff in the chat along the way. And I'll have a couple pause points in the talk also for discussion questions. In terms of where this culture comes from, there's obviously various influences, but some scholars, and including the Clark 2006 book, actually trace through the development of research practices in contemporary research universities all the way back to medieval scholars, usually in monasteries. So these are, European monastic scholars. A number of these values and practices actually were already apparent in the culture of those scholars, many centuries ago, although I'll mention later, with some important differences.